You may have been gaslit into being a victim of psychiatric human trafficking. Do you know what psychiatric human trafficking is? Neither do we, but we're about to find out. We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and Therapist Jenn, and you have landed on the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Gina Fournier, classroomed community college tenured English teacher, who is going to tell us her harrowing story of the psychiatric persecution. This story is definitely not for the faint of heart, everyone. So that is the warning you're going to get. So let's jump into this. Welcome, Gina.
Well, thank you so much, Therapist Jenn and Dr. Teralyn. I am delighted and grateful. I just heard you about a week ago when you spoke with the so important Robert Whitaker from Madden America.
Yeah.
And I was immediately emailing to say, okay.
She found some random link somewhere that I'm not even sure where she found it and scheduled herself on the show.
Yeah,
on a Wednesday.
Provided it to me. I said, thank you.
Yes.
Well, we're happy to have you here, Gina.
Well, I am happy to have this opportunity. And what is psychiatric human trafficking?
Oh yeah, we need to know this.
Yes.
I wasn't the one to have to coin the term and explain it. So I was involuntarily civilly detained. I was locked up in a loony bin. I spell it like the Warner Brothers cartoon because the wardens are Daffy Duck. I'm normally a humorous person, and hopefully I won't be crying during this session because psychiatric human trafficking is nothing you want any part of. So you understand what human trafficking is, and it's usually considered in terms of sex workers or maybe even forced factory work. But in the past few years, the Attorney General here in the state of Michigan, currently, her name is Dana Nessel, she charged John Geddert, a gymnast instructor, with human trafficking in relation with the Larry Nassar story. You might recall the horrifying Larry Nassar story. He was the doctor who sexually abused hundreds of female gymnasts in Michigan before authorities finally listened to the young women. Mm-hmm. So after Larry Nassar, I believe it was timeline after Larry Nassar was charged and put in jail, the Attorney General of the state of Michigan charged a gymnast instructor with human trafficking. And the idea was that he told the girls, you have an injury, you need to go to the doctor who's going to sexually abuse you. And the state of Michigan Attorney General said that's human trafficking. You were going to use these girls for money. So I said, wait a minute. I was suicide swatted.
Can you wait before you do that? Before you say that, we need a definition of what that means as well. Yep. Suicide swatted.
All right. Well, you've heard of swatting.
No, like
you haven't.
I had to look it up. I legitimately had to look it up. So we need to get basic because if I didn't know, there's people that don't know it either. So go ahead. Yep.
Swatting is when people make false calls to the police. They might say that house is on fire. They may say something, but whatever they say is wrong. They're trying to send a SWAT team type response to a home in order to mess things up. And it's been happening in the last few years to politicians. It's been the news as swatting. But I found the term online. Other people have been suicide swatted. So in this case, someone calls the police, calls the dispatch and says, this person's suicidal. You better go get the crazy lady. My employer, my hostile employer, can I name names?
Okay, that's up to you.
Your call, lady.
Yep.
All right. Mm-hmm. Oakland Community College, the largest community college in Michigan, after a year of harassing me as a perceived dissident over reading, of all ridiculous things.
Reading.
I wanted to talk about how students weren't really reading. And this was this is way back in 2013 and before. And it was before AI. I wanted to say, really the students aren't reading. Shouldn't we talk about it? They're earning diplomas, but they don't actually read. And now the situation's really bad, I believe. But anyways, that was perceived as dissidence because I said, the teachers need to tell the truth here. It's our job to tell the truth. But others weren't interested. So I was suicide swatted after a year of psychological abuse with the aim of ending my career. In that year, I was sent to 2 hack shrinks. And even my lawyer said, oh, you better go to the hack shrinks to try to keep your job. And I had no interplay with psychiatry. I hadn't sought psychiatry. And I thought, how would it make sense to go to these psychiatrists? How is this going to work? Isn't this just going to be a setup? And it was. My own lawyer helped do me in. I paid him to mess up the case. I never should have gone to those hack shrinks, who, of course, just tore me to pieces.
So I have a quick question here because
Sure.
I've actually heard of this before. As far as like some employers telling you to go seek help, right? Like go seek help, and then using that help seeking against you.
Yeah.
I've even heard of employers who you have to sign away your, I'm going to say your right to confidentiality within that help and psych evals and things like that. Well, we do that a lot in the addiction space,
Yeah.
actually.
I was just going to say that.
But I was thinking mental health, but that does happen in the addiction space too, which is really interesting because, you're supposed to be getting help to be better and to show up to work, be better. I'm air quoting that if anybody saw that. But then it turns out to be weaponized against you, that very help that you got. Is that what you're saying happened to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The school hired an interim HR director just to take me out. And he had already gone to the Supreme Court to try and fire another community college English teacher, which he didn't succeed in doing. He didn't succeed in ruining the guy's life. But he had already used sexism as a tool to really beat up another English teacher. And with me, he chose psychiatry as a weapon to take me down. And it was extremely effective. You can, as a male in power or a person in power, use psychiatry, even in 2013 and 2012, and I'm sure still now, to dismantle a person's life, particularly if they're a female. My husband had just died from a long illness, and I had no children of any age to defend me. I was targeted, and psychiatry was used like a loaded gun on me.
So the suicide swatting that you were just talking about when you were defining this, so that became a part of the reality from the school, and that they were making claims that you were unsafe, that you were a harm to yourself.
Right.
So then those claims then led to some of these steps that were then taken, even in terms of going to seek out help for that.
Well, the timeline is so messy, which is why it's hard in an hour. I couldn't even tell my story in one memoir. It would have to be up to the loony bin. And then what's happened to me since trying to get justice is even worse, which is why my bags are so bad today. So first, face to face, this guy said, based on nothing, you might be a school shooter. And my lawyer is sitting
who
there.
said that? Who?
William McQueen, the SCOTUS tested teacher crusher, interim HR director.
Got it.
Can you tell she's an English teacher? And
Can you tell that for just a minute? I mean, the descriptive words are just on point, and they are on point on her website, by the way. Everybody go check that out.
Yeah.
Because it's so fascinating. I can't stop reading because it's just engaging. It's very engaging, but your descriptive words are fantastic. So, okay, keep going, Gina.
So this person
said, I had a lawyer sitting next to me and his jaw dropped. He had no recourse because you can't defend against something that doesn't exist. They didn't do any, there are tests. If you really think someone is dangerous, you can hire a firm and say, do we have a school shooter here? None of that happened. But he only said that to my face. In writing, he said, there have been claims that you're acting erratically. No proof. No police report.
Yeah, what does that mean, acting erratically?
Exactly. So for a year, from April 2012 till when I was suicide swatted, February 2013, I was harassed with hack shrinks. I was eventually pulled from the classroom. I wasn't paid, but I wasn't fired. And they were trying to make me quit. And after they suicide swatted me, February 22nd, 2013, top cop gets on the phone to the dispatch, crazy lady, go get her. And they came and got me and took me away for a week illegally. Then I did have to quit because you cannot work for an employer that does this to you. So I was suicide swatted. Terry McCauley, top cop, was told by this HR director to call dispatch. I have the calls. He said, a woman with bushy hair.
Oh,
A woman with
man.
bushy hair. That's
Damn
a
it.
quote.
See, this is the 80s coming back to haunt you.
Yeah. It's the 80s. It's also sexism, which is still around
So
today.
ridiculous.
I've
So
never heard
ridiculous.
someone say I have bushy hair, curly hair, frizzy hair. My nickname in school was Fro, but never bushy.
You're like, that's a new one. That's not
Oh
me.
my
You're like, that's
God.
not me. My hair is not bushy.
So
I was-
ridiculous.
I was
It's curly and
from-
frizzy.
Thank you.
Yes.
So when you are a police officer, the chief of police for the state's largest community college, and you call Livonia Dispatch and say, this woman's crazy, you better go get her, that is suicide swatting, because I literally wrote on Facebook, I am trying to save my life. And I heard the ambulance coming. As I am typing, I am trying to save my life. I'm often sarcastic, but I was not sarcastic about saving my life. I wanted to sue and win the school, but my lawyer screwed up. So
That's what you meant by your life,
That's
right? I'm trying to save my career. I'm trying to save me from this.
Absolutely.
This is the part that I want to talk about briefly, because context matters in everything. Like if somebody would have said, what do you mean by I'm trying to save my life? You would have said, like, everything I've worked for, everything I do, like my career, my essence, like all of this, like I'm battling this battle. It's not you weren't battling you were and you weren't, a psychological battle to stay alive. You were battling a physical battle to keep what you've earned, right? And so this is where I think people get so freaking weirded out about when somebody says, I'm trying to save my life. Well, that automatically means you're trying to end it. You know?
Yeah, but you know what? The system itself does no favors, which is why
Mm-mm.
what you're describing, Gina, like it's like the ultimate setup, because
Mhm.
you're not going to have the chief of police or the dispatch officers that are going to sit down and really go into those questions. Okay. That's not what's going to happen, because it doesn't work that way.
But
It
you know
doesn't.
what? I have in the course of my private practice, I have called the police for someone who I believed was actually suicidal, and they get there and they talk and they ask questions and they don't take them away.
Yeah. But is there a governing body behind that that's trying to set your clients
No.
up?
No. But what I'm saying, that's how I'm talking about this in
Yeah.
terms of like typical would be you would actually go there and talk to the person, right? Not
Yeah.
just
So that didn't happen for you, Gina.
No.
mm,
I use the Freedom of Information Access Act, FOYA. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a really important tool where you can get police reports. They'll redact things that they want to redact, and police reports are a nightmare to begin with. But I got all the police reports, and they didn't have body cams on, but they had a dashboard cam.
Yep.
It was less than 6 minutes from the time they arrived and started circling. All of a sudden, I had heard the ambulance as I'm literally typing. I'm trying to save my life. I hear an ambulance in the background, and I'm getting really scared. And then, not too much later, I see police circling my house on foot, and I literally think they're coming for my computer. I've been posting all the documents on Facebook from the school. That morning, documents had been removed from my Facebook. I have been hacked this whole time. I was hacked on that day. The school documents I had put up, for whatever reason, were no longer there. And I was pissed off. This was just the start of over a decade of very suspicious activity. So I'm like, I'm trying to save my life. I hear the ambulance. Cops are surrounding. Within 6 minutes, they pushed into the house and cuffed me. 4 white men jumped me. I said, I want this to stop. And I meant, I want the school's harassment to stop. I don't want my life to end. I just said I'm trying to save my life and I will win against the school. I am not suicidal. I'm brazen. I'm not
I'm not
suicidal.
suicidal. I'm brazen. And I have really good language skills. Like,
Thank you. But if you don't listen, they don't count. And
true.
unfortunately, I have really been engaged with about 50 police in my story, which we will not be able to hear many details, but I appreciate this. They're sexist. The police in this country, even the few females that I encountered, extremely sexist. They just wanted to come and take me away. Now, it happened to be snowing that day. It was February in Michigan. It took about 45 minutes to cross the town of Livonia, my hometown, from the home where I was renting to what I call St. Mary Merciless Human Trafficking Mental Ward, or the Catholic Fuckatorium, which has now been renamed Trinity Health. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, Catholic hospital chain in the country, in something like 27 states. And I think a very big reason why I can't get anyone in politics to listen to me and help me, because the Catholics are too strong, and there are ways that politicians can still accept secret donations in Michigan. I don't have proof for that, but I've been through way too much.
Oh, I know dioceses are very strong. Like, yeah.
It's horrible.
The power that they have over things, not just Catholic, but any denomination.
And people still defer to the Catholics, especially
Mhm.
when they have money. Like they're
Mhm.
building a new psychiatric something or another near the Grand Rapids area. And of course, the politicians want to say, we're behind mental health care.
So,
Mhm.
Gina, you were there for how long?
I was there for a week.
A
So
week.
it takes 45 minutes to cross town. I was assigned a psychiatrist, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit. I saw her less than 45 minutes in the entire week I was there.
I believe
It took
that.
me more
Yeah,
time to
that's.
cross town.
I thought you were going to say about 20 minutes.
I thought you were gonna say 10, but anyway.
Yeah. In fact, so I get to the emergency room, and they take me to a back door. I'm like, why am I going to the back door? I'm taken into this area with no lights on. It's an office area with no people behind the desk, no medical staff, and no patients. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm terrified because it's like the setting of a horror show. You know how hospitals are overly lit, and that's kind of obnoxious?
Well,
This
you've
was
never
just
been to this type of thing before.
right.
So, yeah, there's automatic fear,
The
right?
first
What are
thing
they
they
gonna
did
do?
was undress me. They had no intention of following the state of Michigan laws, which were written in 1974 and need a little updating. They had no intention of it. And it was all like college students who I was teaching, running around, undressing me, putting me in a room with a guard, and no one ever evaluated me. An intern, a first-year intern, and I had to look this up later, Nicole Shattuck, talked to me for about 3 sentences. And I said, I hope you have a heart, mind, and a soul. Unfortunately, she didn't. That woman shackled me, knocked me out with drugs. I was never evaluated by the white male who signed the clinical certificate. That's the legal paper form in Michigan. You need a clinical certificate by 2 doctors. The intern didn't sign one because she didn't have legal standing. But she locked me up without evaluation. And she shackled me and knocked me out because I asked for phone calls, which you're allowed.
Mhm.
I don't know where my body was for 5 to 6 hours on February 22nd, 2013. I have partied in my life. I'm not a major partier, but I never passed out in my life as a teenager or a young person where I didn't know where I was for 5 to 6 hours. Only criminal psychiatry has done that to me. So the police show up at my house about 10 a.m. I get to the emergency room about 11 a.m. I wake up transferred from the emergency room into the psychiatric ward like about 6 or 7 p.m. and I'm coming out of a drug-induced stupor. And I meet my assigned psychiatrist who says, "Oh, you're still under the influence of the drugs. We'll evaluate you another time." Except she lied. She filled out the second clinical certificate that night. They timed it around 7:30 p.m. and she wrote it in pencil. Under what circumstances in 2013 could you imagine that a doctor would write a legal form, which is also a medical report, in pencil?
None.
Well, I have an idea. When I next saw her, this was a Friday. I didn't see her again until Tuesday. She told me she left for the weekend. I think she wrote it in the car driving to Pennsylvania in pencil.
Yep.
Your state law says you're supposed to see this psychiatrist every day.
So you didn't see, that's 4 days. You didn't see any 4 days? There was no
I want to say something though, because I know where we are, like you might not see a psychiatrist over the weekend. Like if you are civilly committed, right? That's only you won't get discharged on a Saturday or Sunday. You won't really see many people on Saturday. It's like the only time frame that matters is Monday through Friday.
Exactly.
You can only be in crisis Monday through Friday because that's the only time you're actually going to see anybody. So if you get a commitment or a hold, the weekend hours don't matter. They're not part of it, you know?
So she's off 4 days. She comes back Tuesday.
And she's so strong in her ability to rape me over, as I call it, brain rape, and break the law. She tells me she goes out of town. And I'm sitting there. By this point, I realize I have to play the game. Mm-hmm. So I don't call her out. I don't make a big scene. I don't throw a fit because I'm playing the game by this point. Nothing the Catholics did helped me at all. There was no semblance of help. It was all harm. Everything they did was harm.
Well, if I had to ask you a question, what kind of help do you think you needed at that point besides getting out? Exactly. That's what I'm right. That was my point.
Yeah. The doctors, the psychiatrists all moonlighted. No psychiatrist showed up until after 5 p.m., even Monday through Friday. So during the day it was a small, I don't know how large these things could be, but it was like a unit with two hallways that crossed and with a nurse desk in the center. So during the day, I called them inmates, just wandered the halls looking for their doctors.
I was going to say, sounds just like a prison.
People out. It was, because there were bars on the window and we never got to go outside.
Even inmates get to go outside.
We didn't get to go outside. No exercise, no actual therapy. I called it coloring with the Catholics. At night, after supposed things like group therapy and the kindergarten art therapy, we would have a presentation. The first presenter, her first name was Teresa. I call her Saint Teresa. She was the most reasonable person there. She said, check your drugs that they're forcing you to have. It's possible they could kill you with drug interaction. Make sure this hospital doesn't kill you.
Sure she's telling you to check your drugs.
Right. Mostly the nighttime presentations were ridiculous. Like, here I am, a college professor, a published author. We would get, I call them mimeograph, because remember the old days before Xerox
copied.
When I was at the Catholic hospital, the Catholic school associated with this Catholic hospital, the mimeograph machine, I still have one. An 8x11 piece of paper with different smiley faces with different emotions. You might be angry or you might be confused. So one presentation was like the handouts. Are you angry? Are you confused?
Okay.
Like we were second graders.
And you, during this time, Gina, just to go back to the drugs thing, because we talk a lot about that on the show. The drugs that you were taking, what was it? Do you know what it was that they were giving you?
Well, they were trying to give me things like Depakote. I have that all written down. I have all
Did
my
you know this
records.
at the time, though? Did
No,
you know?
no,
Right.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely
Okay.
not.
yes.
And I didn't
Okay.
take the drugs. I didn't
Mhm.
take the drugs. I didn't know about psychiatry. I didn't know about the ineffectiveness of the drugs. At best, placebos cause harm.
Sure.
I didn't know any of this, but I'm like, I can't trust these
So
people.
you didn't take any of the
At first, I
medications.
didn't. I didn't
Okay.
swallow them. You had to line up for the meds.
Oh
You had to fill the
gosh.
cups,
Just like
and
an
then I
inmate.
didn't swallow them.
Yep.
But then I
So
met
they
this
watch
one
you.
woman who told me they won't let me out. They keep telling me they're going to let me out, but they check my blood levels and they say I don't have enough drug in me, which I think was bullshit.
Oh
But
shit.
the inmates were treated so badly. They were treated so badly. People were told, we're going to let you out, and then they didn't let you out. And I
Mhm.
watched this game, and I learned that I'm going to have to play this game and escape from this place. And really, the bottom line is I got out after a week because the way it is, insurance pays for like 5 days, and then you have to ask again. And they didn't bother to ask again. They said, well, we've milked her enough. We're done.
So wait, so ultimately, the danger to self didn't matter when the payer ran out.
No,
Then
no.
suddenly you're cured,
Suddenly I'm
miraculous
free.
recovery, and let her
Miraculous.
out. Yeah, she's
Yes.
good to go now.
She's good to go now. Based on the fact that, I didn't even threaten to sue them. They don't know anything. My medical records are so ridiculous. They're so scant. Basically, the woman who took off for Pennsylvania, my assigned psychiatrist, just repeated what one nurse wrote in the emergency room. They just repeated the same stuff over and over. They don't have anything about my dead husband. They don't know that I went to Ladywood High School, steps away from this loony bin.
Mm-hmm.
Ladywood High School was built by the same Felician nuns that built this hospital. I thoroughly reject Catholicism. This woman knew nothing about my life. This entire ward knew nothing about my life because they didn't ask. Once they had my body, me didn't matter. I didn't matter one bit. I was thoroughly psychiatrically human trafficked for money, about $6,000 in change. They had my shoes. I didn't have a winter coat because the police abducted me in my pajamas. They wouldn't let me out. They made money off of me.
Until they didn't. That's the
Until they didn't.
that's the trafficking part, right? Like that's the whole deal. Once the money ran out, you didn't mean anything to them anymore.
Exactly. They would have had to ask again
Yeah.
my Cadillac teacher's insurance to
And
know
prove
that
it.
I'm okay. And by that time, they knew they had broken the law. On, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Like the 5th day I was in, I met someone called the Patient's Rights Advocate.
Oh
Which
yes.
is a gross misnomer, as you know. Jennifer Gorman. In my horrible story, at this point, I've complained so much to the state. What has happened to her? The state has given her a job as the top patient's rights advocate at the state psychiatric hospital for the forensic criminal supposed nut people in Saline, Michigan. She has risen to the top based on my complaints. There's a lot of crap in my story, but so I meet her and she gives me the first clinical certificate signed by Andrew Mazaichka. And I have little golf pencils because that's all you can have in the loony bin. And I write on it, who the hell is he? And I tell her, who the hell is he? And she immediately starts to cover up. She never gave me the second clinical certificate because she probably didn't have it yet. Because the woman who wrote it in pencil on the way to Pennsylvania and back probably hadn't given it to her yet. On the day before I was sprung, the court-appointed lawyer showed up in her workout outfit in a hurry to make it to the gym. By this point, the inmates, many of whom were regular customers, this is so sad, who just went there to get away from their family.
Mm-hmm.
People would go to get away to the Sticky Sock Hotel. You've heard that, the hospital socks, Sticky Sock Hotel, the Sticky Sock Vacation. People would go there to escape their families or their jobs. But then they would run out, knowing I can't necessarily get out when I want to get out. And I know I can't go in front of a lawyer. The other inmates said, do not say you want to go in front of a lawyer because
Mm-hmm. I know what you're going to say.
You could be put on drugs.
Yep.
You could be, locked away for even longer. So the lawyer shows up in her sweatpants, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to pursue anything because at this point, I've been told they're going to let me out the next day because they're not going to milk the insurance anymore. No, they don't say that part. Later, on local news, that very lawyer was being, there was like an expose as this lawyer getting involved into abusive conservatorships. So I'm certainly glad I didn't try to put my faith in this lawyer's hand. So the next day, when I'm promised relief, my psychiatrist doesn't show up because no psychiatrist shows up during the day. And a nurse I've never met said, I'll just say, there was no pretense of care.
Did they even talk to you about, like, do you want to hurt yourself? Do you want to end your life?
No. But at one point, someone asked, do you want your Catholic mother to visit? Now, I was estranged from my Catholic mother at this time. It should be noted that the Catholic Felician nuns who built this hospital, who built Ladywood High School, also built the church where my mom attended, in which I was raised as a Catholic. And I said, absolutely not. How much more pain do you want to give me? She made me go to Catholic school. I escaped Catholicism 30 years ago. Catholics have now held me criminally and are psychiatrically human trafficking me. And the last person I want to watch me in this pain is my Catholic mother.
Right.
Yet one of the doctors wrote in his notes in broken English, Mother says she has cut down in the past. Cut down in the past.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Does it mean slit her wrist? I have never slit my wrists. I have never cut down in the past. I said, I was 48 years old. I said, I don't want my mother involved. The Catholics didn't listen. I don't even know how they got her number.
Well, I mean, that's illegal anyway. Like, they can't just call people on your behalf because it's your mom.
I asked them to call my therapist. I was going to a therapist to try to help me deal with all this stuff. I asked them to call this guy. So this guy's name was Dr. John, and then he had like 3 consonants at the beginning of his name. So he just called himself Dr. John, so people didn't completely screw up his name all the time. I got written up for being crazy because I called him Dr. John, and they never did call Dr. John.
What?
It's
very common. I gotta say, it's very common because I remember this in where we worked. It's very common for psychology, for doctorates like me, to do doctor and then their first name. That's a very common practice.
Yeah.
So basically, anything you said or did was weaponized as being abnormal,
absolutely.
weird,
Yes.
off your chain,
Absolutely.
like all of it.
Mm-hmm. It was like in the morning. I was still in my pajamas. I hadn't brushed my teeth. I hadn't taken a shower. I got written up for being disheveled. It was like high school. I got written up. It was used against me. I was disheveled. And of course, they love that phrase, flight of ideas.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what you say. They will use the phrase, flight
of ideas. That and word salad were 2 big ones I remember.
They didn't use word salad on me because usually maybe that's with the supposed schizophrenics. And my supposed diagnosis was bipolar.
Oh, interesting. You got a big, hefty diagnosis from that.
From a guy I never met.
Right.
And that's not even what the 2 hack shrinks from OCC said. They said I had personality disorders.
Of course.
They couldn't even, in their criminality, they couldn't decide what the hell is wrong with this woman. And they couldn't accept the truth.
Nothing. There was nothing. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not perfect, but I wasn't suicidal. I wasn't a school shooter. I wasn't a danger to myself. I wasn't a danger to anyone else. I was able to take care of myself. They made it more difficult for me to take care of myself.
And to prove it.
Yeah,
and to prove it because you didn't have access to showers like you would.
right. I didn't, and you need a lot of cream rinse for this hair.
I was just gonna say,
You
and
don't just take the comb and start cream
your
rinsing.
bushy hair did not
I
help
didn't
you
have
at
any
all.
cream rinse.
Didn't have cream rinse.
I'm just trying to figure out like this is gonna sound like such a naive question, Gina, because you've been living this hell for so fucking long. Okay. But this whole time you're talking, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what exactly the threat was that you posed in the first place.
Right, because the
I mean,
Facebook
I get the
post
whole like reading thing, right? And like to the
yeah.
school, like making a comment about the students not reading, but what is the threat that was trying to be covered up in the first place? Like, why were you such a threat to them?
You mean the school?
Yeah.
Well, I had two bully teachers, or two or three bully teachers. It was a really Oakland Community College at that time had 5 campuses. It has 4 campuses now. And
Okay.
so we had English discipline spread over 4 or 5 English departments. And our
Okay.
English department had under 10 people in it. It was a really small number of people. And unfortunately, like 3 of 7 were bullies. And Mr. Online Shakespeare, who I will see in hell, wanted to keep teaching endless sections of online Shakespeare to students who, of course, I'm sure were not reading Shakespeare online at home alone. I'm
Right.
positive. And he wanted to keep doing that. And union teachers hired after me wanted to keep teaching literature courses instead of the hard work of Composition 1 and Composition 2. Do you remember Bull Durham with my love, Susan Sarandon?
Mhm.
Well, she taught Composition 1 and Composition 2, and so did I. But those are heavy lifting because you have to actually make them write research papers.
Yep.
That's heavy lifting. If you have a literature class and you just ask them to read your favorite author, that's not the same lifting. So I was up against teachers who wanted to control the teaching schedule.
Okay.
And I'm brazen. It was one against the others
Yeah.
because the others fell in line, but I kept fighting back. And
Yeah.
eventually I won the right to teach literature courses. But I was going to file another grievance against one of my coworkers when they
Okay.
hired William McQueen to crush me.
Okay. So yeah, so you were the whistleblower and they weren't liking having any part of it.
And I think this William McQueen guy, in my stupidity, in any compassion I have left in me, I think even he didn't realize how well his plan would work and how much he would not just destroy my career, but destroy my life.
Yeah.
That psychiatry can kill you.
Yeah.
Yes, it can.
Yes.
This reminds me of because you'd mentioned Madden America, and so you've written some posts for Madden America, which is pretty cool. But the book Madden America, when you're talking about how if you guys haven't read Madden America, please read the book. Only do it when you're in a good, healthy brain space because it's a tough book to read. But when you're talking about like being, I'm gonna just call it incarcerated when you are
It's full asylum
committed,
living. It's
right?
full asylum living.
But you had to learn
Yes.
what to say and do,
How to play the game.
how to play the game
Yeah.
to look mentally well. Well, I'm saying look mentally well because they wanted you to look a certain way and act a certain way and say certain things, right? To get out. It reminds me of some of those stories in the book
Yes.
Madden
I was gonna say
America.
you're the first like third of that book.
Yes, when they would drown people and until they submitted and said, "I'm not mentally ill anymore," or I'm too tired to fight back," or "I'm just not fighting back anymore," and then they'd be like, "Cured.
Right.
You're good." And I'm like, "This is exactly your story." And not just your story, but I believe it's stories of many people.
I do
Um
too, Dr.
Mhm.
Oh,
Teralyn. So
yeah.
I've been fighting this, but more recently, before the new administration, with the old administration, the Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation into the state of Michigan psychiatric hospitals for very much what happened to me. Now, I wasn't at a state of Michigan psychiatric hospital. I was in a private Catholic hospital. But I have been trying to get my elected officials, Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters, now Alyssa Slotkin, to write new federal legislation about involuntary detainment. It should be tracked like criminal detainment. So we know how many women versus men, how many poor black men versus rich white men are locked up. And what
Bushy-haired
happens?
women versus straight-haired women. Just kidding.
Exactly. But no one will talk to me. No one will talk to me. There has been great effort to bury my story.
Huh.
Unbelievable. What's happened to me since is even more unbelievable, except you guys understand how bad it is inside psychiatry. If, my story outside strains everyone's credibility. How much crap you can receive. The retaliation is real. It is real. It is real. There's a group called Kiwi Farms. They're an international troll farm. They'll do things like when there was a mass murder in New Zealand, they put the footage of the murder online. They're known internationally. And they also like to go after psychiatric patients who talk about it online to harass them, and they harass me. I don't know if they're also hacking me, but the retaliation is incredible, including my elected officials. I will strain credibility. I have been suicide swatted by 2 elected officials in Michigan in the last few years. And I tried to file police reports, and I just got the police report back. Gina is a known 48, which I assume is code for nutcase broad with bushy hair.
Yeah. Psychologically not well.
And he didn't write a report. I have been beat down like you wouldn't believe. You would not believe the crap. They jailed me to silence me.
This, doing this to somebody is enough to make them unwell
Yes,
psychologically.
I'm very unwell.
Yeah. I mean, it's enough to make a person very unwell. And I think that's a risk. As you're talking, I'm thinking about, I don't know if you know much about the addiction space, but the criminal behavior in the addiction space seems a lot like this. And so in Southern California, Southern Florida, like they've really cracked down on inpatient addiction treatments. But the mental health space really is left unlooked at. Like, in my opinion, I don't think it's looked at enough as similar to the body brokering that goes on in the addiction space, which is what you're calling the human trafficking, body brokering, same thing. Like it's when you bring in unwell people and you use them for their insurance benefits. And in the addiction space, they often make them relapse so they can get more,
Yes.
right? So they were looking for you to relapse or be enough to have another stay, right? So, I mean, because we trade people for dollars all the time.
And power.
And power.
So,
Yep.
There's one thing I was going to bring up. Oh, God, there's so many little tidbits. I lost my train of thought, to be honest, and that terrifies me because I assume that I'm going to get locked up for it. I'm in real danger without equal protection. So the
what is it that you keep? Hold on. What is it that you keep doing that people keep calling you for?
Well, I asked my elected representatives for help with AG Dana Nessel to get an investigation because the statute of limitations is 25 years for human trafficking.
Yeah.
So I'm still well within it. And so I've been asking for help with that. And they're really against it. And I also have a lot of strange things going on, like I said, with hacking. For 1 year, I still don't know if it's incompetence or hack. I think it might be incompetence. I received, ironically enough, painfully enough, about 450 texts from like 15 to 20 supervisors at the local state jail asking me as if I was a jail worker to work overtime. So while I was also trying to ask for help from Kristen McDonald-Rivette and Dan Kildee for help with Dana Nessel to read and investigate, the Catholics admitted guilt in 2013 and I still can't get justice. They admitted guilt in writing. that I wasn't seen every day by my psychiatrist. I have 3 sets of medical files that don't mix. They're not aligned. The Catholics never released all the emergency room files. For some reason, I got a copy of full medical records from the feds that totally prove my claims.
But see, this is that other conversation that I keep thinking about, like, and I know that you went in because of other things, but you were deemed mentally ill, mentally incompetent, essentially. But even if you were suicidal at that time and mentally incompetent at that time, let's just play that out. A person can't ever get better.
Right, exactly. It's ridiculous.
That's just it. Like, this, to me, this is part of the conversation is, oh, once you've been labeled this, once you go inpatient for that, like, that label sticks with you forever.
Yeah, you're always a 48.
You're always a 48.
48.
Right there.
Yeah, there's your paper.
Always a 48.
Absolutely. So I think it was probably incompetence, but I got a lot of texts, ironically, asking me to work in a jail.
You should have showed up.
Jailed me for not really stalking a cop up north. I have a lot of bad luck. It turns out a cop up north.
I have a lot of bad luck.
And said I was stalking him, which I didn't do. I had to go to jail and lose that house to get out of that cop's reign. But you're right; it never leaves you. And oh my God, I am losing my train of thought because I know that we've lost chronological order, and
Sorry about
we don't
that.
have time to explain all my stuff. But my elected representatives refused to even look at the texts. They just said, she's crazy. How could she be getting texts from a jail? And so one of them called the local loony bin and said, will the local loony bin please call the police and ask for a welfare check? And the loony bin said, well, we don't know her, but we'll call the police anyways. Hello?
What?
If I had money, I could sue so many people. So the police show up, and they've been here before because I cry. And I can, as a brazen female, I can cry pretty loud, and the neighbors are pretty close. So the police show up, and they're just like, oh, it's Gina. She's a no 48, and they leave. I call back Dan Kildee. I'm like, I told you I needed assistance. Suicide swatting is the last thing I need. Dan Kildee sent another cop out on the same day saying I threatened his life. Now, I wasn't arrested because I didn't threaten his life, but they are really trying to contain and harass me. And the same thing with Kristen McDonald-Brevet. I said, I need assistance. I need assistance. What is going on? And she just skipped to, let's contain her.
You need to get the fuck out of Michigan is what you need.
I do need to.
I know. I'm looking up 48 right here, and I'm reading as you're talking. I'm kind of curious to know what this all is. Yeah, it talks about the 48 is actually they're talking about the months in which there's legal or clinical context going on with somebody, but it talks about a time frame that's used in a number put on people that has a history of hospitalization, incarceration, violent behavior, non-compliant behavior with recommended treatment interventions as a factor to put like this code on somebody and what it means. Because I'm just like,
I love the non-compliant part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And of course, the state of Michigan has an entire, there's a whole program that has been put together around this number and how they get to it.
State of Michigan for the 48?
Yeah.
Well, I will be talking to Troy Cunningham, sheriff. I'm sure. I've talked to him. The local prosecutor and the sheriff was nicer than the guy they set out. I keep losing the one thing I wanted to say. I am really screwed up. I mean, I'm 61. I feel 71. I was hospitalized for a week with asthma after I was suicide swatted more recently, the second time by the politician. This stuff affects your mental being, of course, and it affects your physical being, of course. And I have a real problem. I just can't give up all of a sudden. I can't afford to retire. My future is dangerous. I will be homeless. I will be locked up again. I will be put maybe best in a nursing home prematurely. I can't just give up the fight.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
What does it mean about you to keep fighting?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What does it mean about you to keep fighting?
I cannot let the Catholics run my life in this way. I am oftentimes humorous and sarcastic, less so lately, but Jesus raped me.
Yeah.
Letting Catholics who believe in virgin birth and rising from the dead, which I believe to be delusional, fine if you believe it, but I believe it to be delusional, Catholics should have nothing to do with civil detainment. Zero. They're delusional. How are they going to judge who's delusional?
This is true.
That
I
is
mean, there's a whole
so
spot
stupid.
about religious things in the DSM, isn't there? Unless
Yes.
it's a religious or cultural like delusion and things like that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
psychiatry sprung from exorcism. It's so abhorrent that psychiatry is considered, in its biochemical state, presentable. It's like we had lobotomy, and then we all had lobotomies, and we forgot about psychiatry brought us lobotomy. It's like people think, oh, it's all better now. She must be crazy. She deserved it. Psychiatry never makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, psychiatry has evolved, right? Like
No,
that's what I'm saying.
no.
You know what I mean? Like well, we're not like that anymore. Psychiatry has evolved. Psychology has evolved. I'm like, but yeah, we're still taught the same things from 100 years ago. You know,
Exactly.
how
This is it.
evolved
Like
are we?
what you're talking about didn't happen in 1930 here, Gina.
Exactly.
Like,
Right.
In
Like-
Michigan, here's what I've been trying to remember. So, in the last year, a few women were got a hold of some local reporter, WDIV or something, one of the main stations out of Detroit. And there was a doctor in the Pontiac, Michigan area who was pre-signing clinical certificates.
Pre-signing?
Pre-signing, so that the hospital could more easily psychiatrically human traffic people. Even that expose, the Attorney General did nothing. The state of Michigan Attorney General ignored it. How could she do that? And now what's going to happen to this DOJ investigation now that Trump's in? Well, probably nothing. But it is so hard. So people should know, yes, if you need help, if you are suicidal, don't commit suicide. But you know what? Not a therapist, not a psychiatrist. Talk to a friend. Be very careful before you give up your liberty and call a police or go to a psychiatric ward. You might not be able to control when you leave. You might come out more harmed. I've been in writers' groups. I read Madden America. Chances are you will be more harmed and not helped. Peer support might be your best avenue.
Terry and I talk about that like offline. We haven't spent a ton of time in this podcast on that, but offline we talk about that a lot. And what's even more intriguing about it, Gina, is that we are therapists, right? We have this code that we follow and these ethics that we follow and these safety protocols that we follow. And the hardest fucking part is telling people sometimes to go do those things because ethically we know that we need to offer them something, but we also know, like flat out, that most of the time it is going to cause more fucking harm to people. And this is what you are saying is, at least for me, and I can speak for myself, that is such a hard space to be in. To have to be in that spot where we are, yep, here I am. We have a license on the line. We have ethics we need to follow. Just from a human standpoint, fuck the ethics. From a human standpoint, I want to give somebody advice that goes beyond what I can offer, just as the talk therapist here, to be able to help them. And there's what I want to be able to say to them. And then there's what the institution itself tells us we need to give people as resources. But those resources are super harmful for a lot of people.
Super harmful.
And so I just want to applaud you for saying that, because that take home message you just said, I mean, even on the other end of it, coming from like a therapist, I have a hard time with that space, because I don't disagree with you either. Like, who do I go to? who should I talk to? We had Angie Peacock on this show not too long ago. She said the same thing. Or actually, we were on her show and she was rapid fire asking us questions about it. When is it appropriate to reach out for certain types of help? And I caught myself fumbling over the answer because I know what happens when most people go into an inpatient facility.
Because there's that, what do they call it? Cognitive dissonance for us. Like there's
Yeah.
that two competing things at the
There
same
is.
time.
There's two things that we battle against. And
Mhm.
yes, I want to be able to tell people who's close to you, who are your support systems that you trust.
But also, where we are anyway, we have some really solid resources. So if you're listening close to, where we're from, like there are peer support respite
We do.
places around us, which I think is pretty sweet.
We got a
And
bunch
I
of
think those were developed probably as a response to the trauma that some people have endured in inpatient
Yes.
settings. So I think there's some of those places that are coming around.
Yep.
And I know where we are. We're pretty resource rich. And I get that. In Michigan, maybe not so much, or other areas of the country, but I think it's an important conversation, not to dissuade people from getting help if you're feeling so desperate. But also to not weaponize uh lived experiences against someone. What you were going through was pretty terrible, right? Stressful, awful. I know,
You're still living
when
it. You're
yeah,
still
I know what I was like when
lifetime.
I was going through a stressful time like that. Like, I was pretty erratic, I was pretty off the chain, I was all these things, but nobody ever once thought to institutionalize me. That's fucking stupid. Like, instead, just talk to me, right? Talk. Like, nobody asked you questions. Like, nobody asked you the questions that they needed to ask you. They just went off of somebody else who had a position of power, other people who in positions of authority and power. Their word was taken over yours every time. And I think that's the slippery slope, and that's the message, and that's the power differential that we talk about quite a lot. Everybody holds power, and we need to know that, and everybody holds their own agency, and we need to reclaim that. So our time here is unfortunately coming to a quick close, which I wish it wouldn't, but it is. If you have, thank you so much for sharing this, by the way. Like, I love it when consumers come on. I think their stories are powerful, and often, like, what? This stuff happens still today? It's 2025. Like, the answer to that is yes. It does still happen, and it's 2025, which is why Jen and I show up to you every single week, bringing you another episode of the Gaslit Truth, so that we don't forget that this stuff still shows up.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I never would have guessed that I would have not been evaluated by Dr. Andrew Mazaichka, have the proof, have the admission of guilt in writing, and over a decade later, I am still fighting for justice, and I am the object of incredible retaliation. At one point, the Catholic hospital, a security guard called me trying to scare me off my claims and said the FBI were following me. I can't even get an answer if the FBI were ever following me. It
They
sounds
weren't.
nuts.
They
Yeah,
weren't.
they got
No,
bigger
they weren't.
fish to fry. I'm just saying,
They
there's,
weren't. No,
I mean,
they weren't.
national security and shit, not
insane.
this little frizzy-haired French last name woman from Michigan,
They're not. Nope.
It's all
All
right.
right.
I have developed a psychological penis slicing machine. And for all the white men who have made my life hell,
Oh no.
it will be psychologically installed, and they will dream every night until they're dead that Jesus, with the crucifix, will enact the revenge. Because I'm going to go real,
she's going rogue.
Jesus raped me.
She's going
I wrote
rogue.
it on my house. Jesus raped me. It's a metaphor for non-evaluation by Dr. Andrew
Yes.
Zeichka. As a modern female, I should not be mistreated this badly and have to wait this long for acknowledgement and justice for the truth. The guy didn't evaluate me. I was psychiatrically human trafficked. I am not the danger. I am not the crazy one. My society is crazy and dangerous with Catholicism, psychiatry, and corruption.
Well, if you've hung out with us for this long on the Gaslit Truth podcast, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Only give us 5 stars. And if you have a Gaslit Truth that you would like to share, please do so by emailing us at thegaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. And
That's a
that's a
wrap.
wrap.
Thank you both very much.